Ladies and gentlemen, guys and girls, welcome to a special Sunday edition of the Age of Warfare podcast. I am Centurion Ashes Maximus. That is Negate Aiden Cordier. And we're happy to be here on this Sunday afternoon. I mean, a little later than we wanted to, but some things came up yesterday that neither of us could do it the day of yesterday. But we're here today, and today we're going to be talking about an interesting topic. One topic that doesn't get talked about enough: the Timurid Empire, also known as, for the historians out there, the descendants of the Mongol Empire, or the Mongol Empire 2.0.
Yeah.
But before we get started, as always, Aiden, how are you today, my friend?
I am good. The sun is shining, and I've been doing lots of stuff around the house. So it's nice and tight. Well, it doesn't look too tidy in the background, but yeah, we're tidying up to get that other shoulder, that new bed in, and yeah. So a successful day so far, and it will carry on being a successful because I'm on here.
All right. And before we get started, Lee Edwards says hi. Hey, Lee, what's going on, my friend? Yep, we are on today instead of yesterday, so I'm glad that you could catch us. As for me, man, it's just been very busy when it comes to my my stuff outside this podcast, working on Frogs and Margaritas 4, books to mail, just appointments to attend. It's just been a knot, man, and I'm hoping that this week is going to be a little lighter, but I doubt it, But otherwise, I'm doing okay, and I'm happy to be here today with you. And we're not going to waste any more time. We're going to get into the meat and potatoes of this podcast. Your Northern Savior is here. Yeah, sure. So anyway, the Timurid Empire is a very interesting empire. The Timurids are, for the historians out there, Timurid Empire is like, if you want to put the Mongol Empire, but it's like version 2, and my first time bumping into the Timurid Empire was when I played Medieval 2 Total War. When you get into the late campaign, like the 1300s after the Black Plague, the Timurids come onto the map, and the Timurids are like the Mongols, but they have elephants. So yeah, that's fun. So forget about horse archers are bad enough. Now we're going to add in some elephants to the mix, because why not? So before we get started, I want to show you a map of the Timurids, and so it should really help us. Understand who the Timurids are. So obviously, the red is the Ottoman Empire. This is the 1405. They came into us around the late 1300s, so this makes sense. So you got the Ottomans already conquered Constantinople and everywhere else, and getting close to Italy. Then you have the Mamelukes in green, the Mamelukes, Sultan, and then this all big yellow area is the Timurids, which includes Baghdad, and if you look at the Indus River, parts of India and Afghanistan. Yes, Afghanistan. I'm sure that our good friend, the Afghanistan. Yeah, we talked about Afghanistan already. But something a little different about the Timurids compared to the Mongols. While the Mongols were able to get into the Turkey and in the West, the Russian Empire, the Timurids didn't have as much luck. They were more, attacking Baghdad and parts of Iraq and Iran, modern day Iraq and Iran.
It's an interesting thing about it is it's the top bit to the right of the Black Sea. So the east of the Black Sea, that's where Georgia is. Georgia, famous being where Stalin's from.
Yeah.
That's the Caucasus Mountains. So they hit the Caucasus Mountains, and it's one of these natural borders, which is why in the southeast, it's really interesting, managed to get past Afghanistan, over the Indus River, get to the other side of that valley, and that's where you're getting into. So there's some really high ground as you're getting into there, because obviously, as we talked about with Afghanistan, it's the foothills of the Himalayas, and even parts of the mountainous parts of the Himalayas as you're going in there. So it's down the coast for them, and that's a lot of jungle area. That's where you get into proper jungle. So there's a lot of natural borders that it's hitting up against. You see Saudi Arabia, that area, it's massive deserts. So he's got the massive empire of the Chinese, which we will get into because lots of connections there. And then obviously this borders on the side. So you sort of filled up this bit in the middle as well, and expanded like many empires have done before as well. And it's quite interesting to see how similar it is to Alexander the Great's empire. If you add in all of these places, all of these sultanates and empires here, that's basically Alexander the Great.
Exactly. And oddly enough, the Edwards isn't totally wrong when it says motorcycle gang. Yeah, they were kind of a gang. Only that they had horse archers and elephants instead of motorcycles, but yeah, they were kind of attacked like a gang. If you go into the deep campaign of Medieval 2 Total War, the Timurids they don't attack one by one; they attack in hordes. And I'm talking about full stack hordes. Aiden, if you ever played Medieval 2 Total War, they attack full stack hordes, and we're talking about 9-10-star generals and super experienced soldiers. I mean, these are bona fide motherfuckers, excuse my French, but yeah, I hated taking on the Mongols, and the Timurids were like the bane of my existence. I used to try to beat the campaign before the Timurids, or I try to play as the Moors all the way to the western part of the western part of the map. I never had touched the Timurids. I met them cause havoc in the east.
Yeah, I used to do that in a few games. Like, if you couldn't deal with the Mongols, just play on the other side of the
map. I mean, one time I played as the West, and I actually took on the Mongols, and I had a strategy just intercepting them at the Caucasus Mountains because there was only one. There's a choke point, so I just intercept them and just take them out one by one.
It's the only way I managed to do it.
Yeah, and Lee Edwards says, who wins between Alexander the Great's army and these guys? Honestly, these guys.
I don't know. I'm going to go for Alexander, actually.
Really?
Yeah, so they're really hardcore. But if you look at... So the big difference with the Timurids and the Mongol 1.0 is Mongol 1.0 is where you've got all the horse archers.
Right.
They're incredibly mobile. They're not. They are in the cities. They take the cities, but that's not their primary force. Their primary bit is moving around, getting to the frontiers. The horse archers. Their focus is on that side of things. The Timurids flip that on its head because Tamerlane could not. What was it? Timur. It was Timur, not Tamerlane.
Yeah, to be on the name. Yeah, but which I'm going to bring up a picture of him right now. But keep on going.
Yeah. So one of his things is he really struggled to pin down these horse tribes, and he realised, obviously, from his background and being a Mongol, they like their freedom too much, and he needed to control the cities properly to be able to, at this later stage of civilization. It's amazing the difference in it. It's like the Mongols going into China. They never really held China for very long, huge swathes of the really urbanized areas, because they weren't really that urban side, whereas Timur went for this urban side of it. And he shied away from having these big mobile tribes and integrated them properly into his army. While they did fight for him, they weren't his focus. So the armies that he'd be using would be much more like the Persian armies, the Afghan army, the Indian armies. And as we know, Alexander defeated every single one of them in turn. The only big difference would be the generalship. Alexander won because he was a very good general. Now, you've got Tamerlane, you've got Timur, you've got all of the others that they produced that take those armies to the next level. So I think it'd be a hard fight, but I think Alexander might have the edge because he's used to fighting against those units. But it's one of those ones, you go 50-50. On this, but it's literally just because of the way that he recruited his army slightly different than the original Mongols. way.
Fair. Fair. That's a fair point. Now the only thing about the Timurids is that the elephants. I don't know if you ever saw them. They had cannons, elephant cannons.
Yeah, this see, this is the bit where Alexander might struggle, because you put a nice big block of pikemen in nice long rows. The cannon's going to absolutely love that, as well. Which is why when you're facing cannon, you form line, not column. Whereas obviously Alexander, however, Alexander would have then theoretically moved to forming line as well. And he did have trouble with elephants when he got into India. They really struggled with them. It's one of the reasons his forces revolted when they were in India, because the elephants were just so frightening.
And here's the windowing of the elephant cannon in medieval 2 Total War. That's what it looks like in medieval 2 Total War, with a cannon. Yeah,
just that poor elephant. That the sound muzzle flash right next to its head is, you're gonna have a lot of deaf elephants. That's basically what's gonna happen.
Yep.
But it's if you think about it, that's the original concept of a tank. You want a big gun, you want it mobile, you got to make it move around somehow, so you put it on this. Unless you can construct a big chariot, and essentially all a tank is a big chariot. So it got tanks as far as the warfare at the time is concerned as well.
And so I mean, we talk about the Timurids, but let's talk about Timur the Lame, because Timur the Lame is actually probably the biggest character of the Timurid Empire. He's actually related to the Khans, the Genghis Khan. You know, and actually have something cool to show you. We actually got a family tree.
Ooh, let's see. Yeah, I was literally just about to go look that one up quickly.
So here we go. So we got the top of the Khan, we got Timurid Khan, we got Kabul Khan, Genghis Khan here, and so you can see that Timur is one of the great grandsons of Genghis Khan. He's one of the great grandchildren of the Khans.
And despite the whole urban legend that so much of the world is actually descended from him, he's not just a generic descendant of Genghis Khan. He is family of it. Extended, obviously, but he's family in that same group. Think of how, say, the First World War, and how you had the Tsar of Russia, the Kaiser of Germany, and the King of England, and they were all. I know it was closer at that point; they were all cousins, but it's that kind of relations that every European royal and noble at that time was essentially related in this way. So it's that he's part of that aristocracy of the Mongol Empire. He's got. You're looking at, oh well, your great grandfather did this, so why can't you? And he was like, yeah, why can't I? So let's go and do it.
So it goes to family tree. And Timur the Lame was actually born in modern day Uzbekistan.
Yes, yeah. There's some weird. It's not paranormal.
Take your time. Take your time.
It's so there's a mythos that comes around it. So you know how you get Arthur will rise again to defend Britain. That whole mythos, the tomb of Tamerlane, is the same. It seems very similar to this. That you'll get this rise again when Tamerlane rises again. And I've seen it used in quite a lot of mythos of sort of later things, just the sort of book you pick up at an airport type of thing. But it's quite interesting that he is that kind of figure for that area of the world as well. And you don't really hear about Uzbekistan and all of the. So if we're talking stans, people would go, "Oh well, Pakistan." It's like, well, no, go north a little bit, and you've got so many more of them. It's like,
and then you got Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Tajikistan. You know, you got a bunch of them.
And it's all of those bits between Russia and China in that big open, wide spaces gap.
I might call that area the Urals, the Euro, the Urals.
Yeah, it's southeast of the Ural Mountains. You get the Urals which go straight up and down. It's a bit like we say the Caucasus region when we're talking about Georgia and all of that area.
Yeah, but now we're going further to the east to the Urals. Yeah. Baden, there's something I wanted to show you. This is what I'm talking about in medieval 2 total war. You got the full stack Timurids. And look at this army. Aiden, look at this army. Look, silver shields. Look, 10-star, 10 dread. These are the Timurids in medieval 2 total war. These are the stats. So if you want to even take a mid RPG approach to it, this is like the ultimate, one of the ultimate armies you can fight. If you want to take a more mid RPG look into it.
That's absolutely insane. That lovely English guy there is not going to last very long.
No, he's not. No, he's not. I mean, unless you take him out one by one. And I mean, and the English guy's not too bad. He's a 6-star general, and it goes up to 10. He's a decent general, but compared to Mia, yeah, you're gonna get your ass kicked most of the time. And Aiden, I mean, I know it's a bit of a tangent, but when you take on these armies, it really is that hard. It's really hard. It's actually not as easy. It's really that hard, as hard as I'm telling you. Because the thing about the more stars, the more morale they have. So you can't get them to rout easy. They don't rout easily.
And that's how you get rid of a big army. Usually, you just get them to run away. But if they're not running away, then you actually have to deal with them, which is really annoying. I'm sorry, Aiden, but Lee kind of brought up a good question here. How will you weight the use of elephant warfare, to speak from these guys, Hannibal or the Indian army, and the Sandra encountered? So a bit of a tangent. It's what's interesting about it is it's very limited just by its very nature of there aren't that many elephants. And it's not as if you can produce more very easily, because elephants are quite hard to farm. I presume they're hard to farm because no one's really had an elephant farm, which, if they were going to do that sort of thing, they would. It comes down to supplies, mainly. So if you think of there's the factor in logistics of, if you have a wagon train that's X amount long, you then get into numbers that start becoming exponential, because that wagon train has to have horses to pull the wagons. So if the horses are pulling the wagons, then you have to have another X amount of wagons to feed those horses. But those new wagons need horses that need feeding, so you need even more of them, and so on and so forth. So this is where you get things like Marius's mules. And the whole reason that came along is, well, if the guys carry their own stuff, then we can reduce this logistics. Obviously, war's won on logistics. I can't remember which famous American general was really, really obsessed with that. I think it was originally a French quote, but the Americans really took it on board with their supplies. Really, really seen in the First and Second World War, and in the Gulf Wars as well. Really, really prominent. So when you're looking at it from that perspective, the logistics back then are a lot more difficult. You don't have your C-130s to come and drop a load of animal feed in. You've then got to make sure these animals don't get sick. The animals are also very expensive. So as I said before, they're like the tanks of the warfare back then. And if you say, to use the Second World War example, the Germans had some really fantastic tanks. They were really big. So they were able to carry a lot of armor, so they were hard to take out. They had good guns on them, so they could take out a lot of other tanks. So they could really hold their own. But they had complicated machine parts. They had big fuel consumption. You had to have the logistics to get the stuff there, which meant you need all of these trucks. But if you're producing all of these parts, you've got to get that there. Elephants fall into that category. It's hard to get enough of them to impact what you're doing, and they're very limited on the terrain that they can do. Hannibal getting those elephants over the Alps the reason it's so famous is because it's absolutely insane that he did it, and that as many survived as did. He lost so many of them. Think of it in modern terms, that would be taking, say, you've got 40 tanks, and you decide to go over a mountain range into a country. You get to the other side and you've got 10. Like, you'd see that as a massive, massive loss. Whereas obviously back then, doing that with something like elephants was a really big loss. However, their impact on combat is a shock and fear factor. As soon as you overcome that shock and fear, people can start dealing with them. Again, tanks, First World War. Those first tanks coming over, they could be dealt with as what was on the battlefield. But no one knew that. No one could deal with that. So you saw troops running away. All Quiet on the Western Front shows this really well with the French tanks. They couldn't deal with them. They're like, what is this? It was the fear and the absolute shock, as we were talking about routing an army with discipline. If you've got a disciplined army, they're not going to rout. So when you lose that shock factor, you've now got a very unwieldy thing that's going in, and that thing needs support. If that thing spooks, you're starting to lose your own troops. To then bring in the tank example again. If you send a tank in against infantry without infantry support, you're losing the tank. If you send that tank in and they get spooked and try to get away and they don't know where the infantry are, they're just going to run them over. It's that kind of concept there. So it's good as a shock factor. In India, where there was enough of them and kind of everyone had them, everyone was kind of used to using them over that terrain. Well, obviously they're good on that terrain because that's where they're from. It does work as just an additional thing that you can use, but the impact lessens very, very rapidly. For the logistical cost of using them, it starts to be kind of pointless. Think of the loss of armor on cavalry. It's as soon as you've got stuff that can reliably go through that armor on nearly every single soldier, why are you weighing yourself down with it? Like, what's the point? You're going to die regardless, so it's pointless putting all the logistics in to get that thing. With an elephant, as soon as someone can deal with elephants, why put in all of that money, manpower, logistics into getting the elephants there? Why not just get another big block of troops that you know is going to do just as well against this enemy, because of the way that warfare works. So they're good, but there weren't enough to have an impact in certain theatres where they could have had more impact, and the fear factor goes down quite rapidly as soon as you're used to encountering them as well.
All right. I want to bring this up. It's kind of AI. It is artificially it has been artificially enhanced, but this is based on a painting of Timur the Lame himself. And I think the biggest difference between the Timurids and the Mongols was that the Mongols came from the Far East, close to China, the area of China, while the Timurids were more, they had more of a Islamic kind of influence, since they came from close to by the Caspian Sea, and Islam was a dominant religion.
This is the interesting bit. It's that Eastern ideas and Central Asian ideas. So so you've got obviously the Eastern Asian, as you're saying, with the Mongols, but the Central Asian influence is going down. And if you're going to build big cities and you're going to have a formal religion, that you're going to be Muslim. And even if you're not Muslim, your architecture as well is going to be almost exactly the same. If you're going to have the trappings of someone who's in charge, who's a sultan, an emperor, a king, any word you wish to use for it, the clothing, while it's associated with certain cultures and religions in that area, even if you come from the outside, you will have that clothing to signify that you look like that as well. So sort of to fit in as well, because you want to be in charge. So you get all of these things in. So this is where you get this. It looks, if we weren't talking about the Timurids, you could have easily gone, oh, this was one of the Ottomans, or this was one of the other sultanates from around Baghdad. Yeah, it's very much a muchness at that point.
But if you pay attention, Aidan, if you pay attention to the crown, it has the feather coming out of it, which is Mongolian, which is a Mongolian symbol. So it's kind of a mix of, like you said, the Sultanate and the Khan, and they did call him a Khan, Khan Timur, Timur Khan.
And it's this exactly. So this the thing is, you take on the major trappings, so you go this, and then you look a little bit closer and you go, well, actually that. And if you even down to, I think they've tried to do it with the facial structure as well. You can see that he's more Central Asian than he is more to the Saudi Arabian Peninsula, sort of that West Asian look to him. It's got that. It's a slightly different look from the Urals compared to, say, the Caucasus as well. That's those differences you see in people. And I don't know whether that's intentional or whether that's just what was produced from it. But yeah, you get these elements in there that are like, well, that is ever so slightly different. Oh, that's where that's from.
Now we're gonna throw a bit of a curveball here because because in Age of Empires 2, we're gonna go to another game I love, Age of Empires 2. You can play as the Tatars, and the Tatars, and some people believe that the Tatars and the Timurids are the same. I mean, the thing is that there's some similarities to that, but there's also differences. Because the Tatars, for those who don't know what Tatar is basically a mixture of Turkish and Mongolian, influences. So basically, the Tatars it's a mixture of Turkish and Mongolian. So, like you said, the Western and Central Asian influence. Combining
when they cross over. What's interesting is you still get some Tatars around. There was a whole thing in the war in Ukraine where you had Tatars in the units, and it's with if you go to the different Cossacks, as we talked about Cossacks before, they're considered part of that, but they have that slightly different look because they've got this Ottoman influence to them. Whereas a lot of the Cossacks do have this influence, but not quite as strong. You see more of the influence from just the general Mongolian, Central Asian, sometimes Eastern Asian. The Tatars, you can see that it is actually more this Ottoman Turkish influence that comes in as well, and it's like a melting pot of all of these different cultures where everyone's. So you can tell they're part of this wider group. But then they've got this influence that shows they're connected to this other area or this other area or this bit as well. So there's a lot of that influence, and it's still a big thing around that sort of southern border of Russia, obviously with the Stans, and obviously going all the way up to Ukraine as well, because it is that whole area. Is one of the big things about Ukraine. It's got a lot of flat areas. Why it was well known for grain being a breadbasket. Especially of the Soviet Union, and the wide open plains where you go across, what are wide open plains known for at this time? Horse archers. Who were the major groups of people who were the horse archers? They were the Cossacks, and they were the Mongolians that came through, because obviously the Mongolians controlled everything up to Hungary at one point. So it was the Hungarians that were one of the first groups to really stand up to them and push them back far enough.
So basically, it's a good question that was asked on. I googled it. So, what race were the Timurids? So, what are they actually? The Timurids are actually I want to say Tatars because they were mostly Mongolian, but they were Turkicized. Basically, they had a heavy Turkish influence. So that's why this is why we don't call them the second Mongol Empire. We call them the Timurids. It has a different name.
It's that bit. So especially on the map there, so the Ottoman Turks, that was one group of Turks, but the Turks were the Turkish peoples. They were all across that region. So when you look at the Timurid Empire, that northwest part especially is full of Turkic peoples as well. And then you've got the Mongolian influence from the northeast. That's where you're coming down from the stance we've talked about. You've then got the southeastern influence, which is now obviously Pakistan, your India coming into there. And then you've got from the southwest, you've got the Arabian Peninsula influence, and even some northeast African influence coming in from that angle as well. Not to mention what's going on at the eastern Mediterranean.
Not to mention the Mongols themselves, they never considered themselves Tatars. That was actually a term invented by the Chinese. To when they referred to their northern neighbors, that's what they referred them to as the Tatars, the Chinese. So you could say the Chinese kind of invented that term. You know,
it's another one of those weird ones where there are groups that are known of because of an outside influence or specifically to identify them as different. I think the Byzantines is another classic one. They were the Eastern Roman Empire, but we call them the Byzantines to create this nice box and make it an easier to understand bracket to look at as well. So if you're looking at a group of people and you name them something, if you're the people that are doing all the writing and have all of that influence, that's what they're called. The Celts, another classic example of that we've talked about many times as well.
Yeah, the Celts, right. And so we're going to pull up a map of 1405. So this was Tamir's expansion. This was his. So you can see Tamir. Yeah, I mean, you see New Delhi, what modern day New Delhi in India. Maybe pull it up even a little more. See if that helps.
Yeah.
So so New Delhi. So this was the eastern. The furthest eastern was New Delhi. So you could say the Punjab region of India. Now this is the Punjab area, the Punjab River, and you got Pakistan. Of course, you got our friendly Afghanistan. You got Kazakhstan, Tajikistan. All the stands here, over here, and they went as far as Turkey, on this, the middle of Turkey. And this is what I was talking about with the Timurids. They got to Turkey, but the furthest they got was central Turkey. They never really got any further than that, unlike the Mongols.
What's really interesting to note is how many modern capital cities that they had. So they've got Turkey's capital city. They have Baghdad, so obviously they're in Iraq. Not quite Syria as well, but not far off. And then obviously every single other country listed, and even India's capital as well. So you've got this influence because where you've got the capital cities, often your major cultural center. We talked about this before with the different scenes, say Washington DC and New York or Sydney and Canberra, where you don't always have it as that. But say London, Paris, Berlin, that's a central cultural hub for that nation as well. And with many of these nations, it's very similar as well, where you get that central hub. India's a bit weird with that because of the size of India and how many different disparate groups were brought together to form India. But you do see that this is obviously there is cultural influences that are going to still be there later on up to the modern age as well. It's only 620 years ago, which in the grand scheme of things isn't that long when you think about it. There's plenty of places in the UK that are from the 1400s. You can wander around and you just see them. So if your country's got history from the 1400s, there will be just buildings dotted around. Usually defensive structures or religious structures are the main ones, but even to government buildings as well. They have deep influences, even if they were built later on. They'll hark back to the other cultural influences as well. So it's quite interesting to see how this area keeps being under this same group of people, keeps being conquered by someone from somewhere in this area will take over this whole piece as well and pull them all back every so often as well.
Right. And so I also wanted to bring this, when we stop showing the screen, maybe share the other screen here. I wanted to show this. This is a new bonus, a Timurid coin, or a diner, might they call it. Yeah, it was a Timurid coin, first ever minted coin on the Timurid Empire. So yes, they have money as well. So Aiden, I guess the question becomes, who do you think was more nomadic in nature, the Mongols or the Timurids? Who do you think were more nomadic in nature?
I'd say the Mongols were more nomadic. I see the Timurids as, they have that Mongol 2.0, but it's the Mongols settling down. Right. So like in the UK, where you get a certain housing estates, where a lot of the families are descended from travellers who ended up getting council houses and settling down. There you see this sort of different lifestyle, where like a certain group of them will go to a certain area and go, no, we're just going to stay here now. And then you become urbanized rather than in that sort of more nomadic lifestyle. And to me, this is what happens when Mongols become urbanized and do that. So it's like I was talking about the military earlier. This focus on this sort of like centralized government with drawing your troops from these settled populations rather than nomadic populations as well. So it was that change in focus to do that at various points throughout the empire. You've still got this wonderful connection between the two, which is obviously what made them such a powerful military force as well. Where it's, while they didn't manage to subjugate all of these tribes, they still had good relations with a lot of them, which meant that they would work with them. And then you'd then have a bunch of horse archers, and just horse archers, the Mongolian horse archers as well. So you're talking the best of the best here coming in. So you're able to swiftly conquer areas, to respond to counter invasions, to be able to hold it at a certain point. But again, it's another empire where it's that big personality at the top that holds it all together. And as soon as you lose that big personality at the top, you're going to start to see it fall apart. This happens every single time, and every single empire that we've looked at, we always find that point in there where they go from slightly nomadic to centralized government when they're settled, and then from there it moves on. I'm getting very close to Malthusian principles here, which are kind of passé these days, but there's a certain truth behind it at the basic level that once it's settled, if you end up with this one person in charge, because they're really good, as soon as you lose that one person in charge who's really good, everything falls apart. Alexander the Great is the clearest example of this in history, of conquers all of this stuff, dies, the whole place just goes to hit everywhere, from Greece to India, warfare constantly until they can settle up all these new kingdoms that are all successor states. But they all have massive influence from the local area and from this empire that was there before. Ptolemaic Egypt is one of the easiest to look up examples of one of those places that happened after Alexander. So you've got this big area that he's tried to centralize. He's tried to get people to settle down. He struggled to get these nomadic tribes to settle down with him. So that mere effort of doing that shows that obviously the Mongolians, the original Mongolian Empire, still had much more of a nomadic ideal to it, because they never really had that problem. They might have a problem with one of the local leaders just deciding to go off and do his own thing, and that would last all of 5 minutes before he got killed, and his tribe got subsumed into another one. But that wasn't really happening under the Timurids. Well, not as often. I'm sure it did happen at various points, but it wasn't a thing that was the normal state of affairs, should we say.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, I know some people even ask, do the Timurids exist today? And the answer is no. There is no such thing as Timurids no more. There's no. They went extinct. And I'm sure, and the reason why they fell, I'm sure you could guess, is what destroyed Rome: civil war.
Yep. Yeah, guy at the top is struggling, or someone else wants to take over power. They start a fight with them. They can no longer fight against the people who want to attack their borders. They start fighting amongst themselves. Everything starts falling apart. Now, really interesting bit here is what happens at the end of that civil war. Now, pull it up just to make sure that I get the sequence of events right. So,
okay.
So yeah, a series of civil wars. So, 2 seconds. Where am I? There I am. So, what then happens is this ends up getting taken over by its bit that I was looking up was the Sultanate from the eastern area of Turkey.
Right.
So it's that strong area of control. Like I said before, divide it into 4 areas. He starts taking control. He moves further in. He goes all the way through. And obviously, this is where you got Samarkand. Samarkand, obviously, very famous as it was. And what you end up getting is that there's nowhere else really for these people to go, but they're already in northwest India. So you've got a strong group there who then, through all of these various changes, books that's becoming an identified group, becomes the Mughal Empire, which takes over India. That is there until pretty much Europeans start turning up and taking it over. It's the end of that group, which and the successor to what happens from that. The sort of the East India Company are fighting against, which is obviously sort of hundreds of years later. It's like 250 years later after those events, because we saw the height of this empire was in 1400. The collapse is really in about 1500-ish. So good 100 years though. That's a pretty solid amount of time.
Yeah, so basically a couple of generations, you could say.
Yeah,
but really, what I want to talk about more is does something interesting happens after the fall of the Timurid Empire, because you have somebody called Babur, which is a descendant of Timur and Genghis Khan through his father, for Timir's father and Genghis Khan's mother. Now, again, this is where we get the 2 families mixing together, right? So Babur, he starts something called the Mughal Empire in India.
Yeah, and this is the bit that I was going on about. It's this Mughal Empire that goes into India.
Yep.
And
yeah, exactly.
Wrecks face as well. This is one with this is with this descendant line from Genghis Khan, and even like when you go back a little bit further in Genghis Khan's line, we don't know the names as well, but they were still that prominent. Sure, if you know about northern Chinese history, you probably know a lot more of these names. You see that there's constantly these prominent individuals popping up all along this line. As you're saying, it's like he's descended from one side and the other side. So you've got this guy, it's like, 2 or 3 generations later, yet another epic general of an empire as well. So
and what's interesting is, unlike the Timurids, that the success of the Mughal Empire lasted until the British occupation of India. You know, which is all the way close to the late 1800s. So you're talking about it lasted about close to 400 years. So it's crazy. It's crazy how all that went.
It gets even crazier when you realise the last remnants of that empire.
Right.
Winston Churchill fought against them. That's how mental that is. That how long that influence lasted. So essentially, we could theoretically say Winston Churchill fought Mongols.
Yeah.
If you really want to push it, you can argue that. I do wonder, where do you, if you come up where the Mughal Empire, where it actually gets its name from as well, because it seems very similar to Mongol as well, and I'm wondering whether there's a name connection in there.
I think I think the main connection comes from the fact that there was that because it was founded by Timir's descendant, who was also a descendant of Genghis Khan, the Mongols. So I think that's where it came from. But so if I'm correct, I can't be entirely sure though. But that's my theory.
That's the hymns.
Oh, look, it says the Mongol designation for the dynasty was a reference to the descendant from the Turco-Mongol conqueror Timur. So that's where they got. I thought my theory was kind of correct. Yeah, it came from the idea that the first emperor was a descendant of the Mongol Empire and the Timurids.
Yeah, it's a translation, but more of a transliteration that's been modified, and it does actually. It's just a different way of saying Mongol. Which, interestingly, they were mainly Turks, not Mongols. But the
interesting thing is,
applied, as Mongols.
Yeah, but the interesting thing is the Mongol Empire was in India, and they never really stretched any further than India. Maybe they got into Pakistan and modern day Bangladesh.
Yeah, because they essentially, they went out from Afghanistan down to Persianized Turco-Mongols. This is basically what we've been saying is this mix that we've been talking about, that you've still got this strong Mongol influence, but you've got this Turkic influence coming in as well. Persianized obviously being because they're from the Timurids, who were over the Persian lands, obviously what we now know as Iran, as well. But yeah, I just find it incredibly interesting that that's never clicked in my head before.
But then the funny thing is, the Mongol Empire had control of Bangladesh and India, but yet modern day Bangladesh is mostly Muslim in Bangladesh, while in India there's not more variation in India.
Yeah, that's a lot to do with the later history and the partitioning of India under the British Empire when we left in 1947, I think it was. Got the year correct. But that was also along the lines of, so we partitioned it because Hinduism, there was a lot of internecine stuff between Hindus and Muslims. So being the British consulate at the time, they turned around and went, right, so all the Hindus are here, and then we put the Muslims over here, and we put the Muslims over here, and everything's fine. Completely ignoring the fact that obviously there were Hindus in Pakistan and Muslims in India. They just sort of drew a line and went, well, just get across the line and before we close the border. And it was a mess. But the reason that was done was because you had these two prominent populations. So it's interesting that what was an Islamic empire turned into a Hindu empire very, very quickly. As well. It's like Hindustan becoming its name, which obviously gives
Hindustani, yes.
Yeah.
Yep. And also, I wanted to show this off. It's the Timurids marching in a battle against the Egyptian Mamelukes. A painting, and you see the red flag of the Timurids. So that was the big thing about the Timurids. They always had a red flag to symbolize their armies. That was their coat of arms. You could say.
It was.
Yeah, I just find the paint to be well made, well done. I mean, whoever painted this.
And it's really quite clearly Eastern influences as well. You can see lots of different Eastern influences. It's not just like one. as well, and it's a painting of something that's actually from
and there's
the
another
west of
painting.
their empire.
And this might be depicting the wedding of Timur with his wife in 1375. The wedding between Timur and his wife. So yeah, pretty good Easter egg we found here.
Also, one of the things to notice is obviously Timur in the middle. Look at how he's dressed, and now think of 1700s Southern Russian. That sort of more traditional clothing. It's very, very similar in that kaftan or something over the top of something else, and the hat as well. And then obviously the moustaches were a fancy thing.
Now this may be a bit of a stretch, Ethan, but look at the hat. And if you look at as early as the Huns, they had hats like that too. The Huns, attended the Hun.
Yeah, so it must be the thing that we were talking about, like with the helmets. Of like it's you've got that cultural influence, but it's an influence because of where they're from. Or this is a practical piece of things, so we get identified with it. So we then use it to identify ourselves, and then that just goes through culture, and then people end up wearing it because that's what they wear.
And
this
was the flag of the Eastern.
If you go back one picture, right? So this is also very important. So that one that we've just seen,
this was Timur's umbrella.
The 3 dots. Obviously, the second one is the 3 crescents, Islamic crescents. So those 3 dots, that was the symbol of the Timurids. Which was very similar to that. So the detail on that painting of actually having it on there shows that it is obviously his symbol as well, which is obviously a modification of the crescents.
And this was the battle flag, the banner type used by Timur on his campaigns. And you notice the crescent on top.
Yeah.
Suggesting that the Timurids might have been Islamic. You know, it's not, and I think that's another between the Timurids and the Mongols. The Mongols never really had a set religion. I mean, some Mongols they convert to Islam, but some of them retained their the original faith.
So the original Mongolian faith is really, really interesting. There's actually it's connected to a branch of Buddhism. Oddly enough, we would generally term it as a pagan faith to start off with, but then you get these modifications, and it is very, very close to a lot of different ways that Buddhism went as well. You also end up later on in the Last Crusade, where you get Christian Mongols. The Christians Christian Mongols coming from the east to support in the Last Crusade. Hence, fighting, that was the picture of them fighting the Egyptian Mamluks, because that was what the Last Crusade was, fighting the Mamluks, especially
the Mamluks,
and that was weird because obviously it's Islamic and Christian forces together fighting another Islamic force, as well. Which
once upon a time the Mongols were feared. Once upon a time the Mongols were feared. Now you are using them as allies.
Yeah. It's absolutely crazy situation when you see how far it's only if you look at like the 1200s and the way the Mongols are viewed, and then you look at the 1400s, and it's a completely different story. Everything that's going on, especially as the reconquering of Russia that goes on at the time. As you get the with this is the other connection with Russia. There's a rebellion against Mongol lords. A lot of the Mongol lords in Russia have there's an old thing of when the top Khan dies, you have to then get all the other head Khans. They all go back and then decide who the new Khan is. And they took that. The story goes that they took that opportunity for them not to have their strongest leaders there to start leading this rebellion. that ends up pushing the Mongols out of Russia, which is another interesting thing about the Timurids, is the Mongols have then pushed that direction as well. So that's a heavy influence on more Mongolians being pushed out of Russia down into what is then the Timurid Empire, which could explain how he managed to conquer so much, had so many troops.
Now, I wanted to show you, I started reading this book, Hero Born by Jin Young. Yeah, good book so far. I've started it. Now, it has little relation to the Mongol Empire, but I can't be sure. But this was the inspiration to a Mongol series I wanted to write, but then I just got overwhelmed because it's just so many moving parts.
Yes, yeah, it is because it's a confederation of tribes with the strongest leader holding all of the tribes together. In fact, they held it together for that long by having a succession of strong leaders. It's amazing. But as you say, it's moving parts because each of those tribal elements is still an individual tribal element with all of its own things going on as well. It's a bit like the early United States. With, yes, you do have a federal government, but each state's basically doing its own thing and is its own entity, or like the European Union is now, where you've got the European Council, but each country's still doing its own thing. And it's more that sort of confederation rather than a true sort of full union at that point as well, which is just absolutely insane. I just find it insane how long they kept that going as well, because usually that sort of thing, as we've talked about, collapses after the first leader goes, but they didn't collapse.
Well, we're starting to getting close to the hour here, so I guess my final thoughts about the Timurids. My final thoughts about the Timurid Empire is it's a very interesting empire, and obviously it's one you're not going to learn in school. It's 71 you're going to have to study on your own. But I mean, the wealth of information is great. And really, if you play Medieval 2 Total Wars, that's a great game. Even though you kind of have to work your way to the late Middle Ages. But there's also a good game called Crusader Kings 3. You go as a player as the Timurids as well. I'm sure you heard of that one, Crusader Kings.
Yeah, I play Crusader Kings 2. I just endlessly played that for a while. Very, very good game. I think that's one of the interesting points here is there's a lot of games out there that do cover this time period, but you often find that there's very little on this middle bit of history, sort of the end of the medieval period. When people think of the medieval period, they think of the Black Death, the 1300s.
Yeah, right. In fact, I would go as far as to say, Age of Empires 2 is always trying to add new civilizations. I mean, when you get a new PC, you really got to get on Age of Empires 2. They really did a good job. You could play as the Hindustanis, the Mongols, and all that. They should really add the Timurids as a playable civilization. They should really add that. I mean, elephant cannons? What?
Yep. That's just a given. That like people rock up for that one easy.
Or the great bombard cannon. Yeah. What? Age of Empires goes to the gunpowder age, so why not? Yeah, and you could play as the Hindustanis and the Dravinians, the Indian civilizations.
Yeah, so it's one of the other interesting bits about this bit of history that I really wish it was covered more. As the problem you get when teaching history is when you get to sort of the end of the 1300s into the 1400s, there's so much more of the world that's connected to each other that there's you kind of have to focus on your own country, because that's when the countries are really starting to properly form as well.
Why?
This country is this country.
That's true, right?
To talk about other countries, but what the whole point of that is that the country isn't in isolation. The reason that country is forming is because of all of these other strong countries around there. So having that split into this is, I know the US does it with US history and world history. They have that split. And that, I think, is that method of teaching of having, yes, these are separate things, but there needs to be this crossover one in the middle. Because this is the time period where you're starting to get cannons and guns this is and obviously the Battle of Sluices earlier. It's the first use for cannon on a ship in the West. When we rocked up to the coast of France and went, guess what we've got? And you end up having these really early firearms start to come into it, but people sort of know about this and then skip straight ahead into sort of more Renaissance stuff, into stuff like
the Renaissance, right?
It's sort of like musketeers and the Tudors and things. So, and that's straight into the 1500s. The 1400s keep sort of getting forgotten about.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be honest with you, Aiden. I'm not a major RTS game, history games kind of skip out on this period. They really do. I mean, even the Civilization series does a poor job with this time period. You got the Mongols, but that's about it, man. I mean, how about the Timurids or the Mongol Empire? How about some of that? I mean, Medieval 2 Total War is kind of the only game that does a really good job capturing this particular time period. But the problem with Medieval 2 Total War is turn-based, right? And you start all the way in the late 1000s. So you gotta work your way for almost 200 turns before you get to the Timurids.
It's a bit like you get that with Crusader Kings to a certain extent. Even though it's real time that you can slow down, it's trying to keep your dynasty going for that long is an absolute nightmare. I started off as the Byzantine Emperor and ended up as a northern Russian noble at one point. It's like, and I hadn't even got out the 1200s. I didn't think.
I don't know if you've seen Age of Empires 4. Age of Empires 4 might be the kind of game that does get into that time period, sort of. But the thing is, I haven't really touched Age of Empires 4. I just never really, had the desire to touch it. If I'm being honest, for me, Age of Empires 4 just seems to be a remake or a super HD version of AOE 2, which I think is a superior game.
Yeah. Good. 2 seconds. I know we're right at the end, but give me 2 seconds. Sorry.
Yeah. I mean, we're about to finish anyway, so really, like I said, my final thoughts about the Timurids are very interesting to study. The Wikipedia does pretty good discussing the Timurid Empire, and I think you do yourself. I mean, if you're a history nut like we are, I think you should really kind of look them up a little more. I think the videos too about the Timurid Empire on YouTube, if I'm correct. Let me see the Timurid Empire. There's some, there's some videos up there. You just look up the Timurid Empire on YouTube, and you got some videos. In fact, it's actually one has a title called "The Greatest Empire You've Never Heard of," which I think is a pretty good title because unless you're a history nut like I am, you've probably never heard of the Timurid Empire. You've heard of the Mongols, you've heard of ancient Rome, the Greeks, but you've never really heard of the Timurids. Like, who the hell is the Timurid Empire? But there are videos up about the Timurid Empire, and in fact, there's actually a quick video comparing the Timurids with the Mongols. They have a bit. It's a short video, but it kind of compares the two empires. So. Yeah, also my final thoughts, to be honest, just give them a check. I mean, check them out. I mean, I just hope there's RTS game that you can play as the Timurids proper. I know you can mod Medieval 2 Total War, you can mod it, but I'm talking, a proper release, not where you have to mod it. I don't really count mods as as a game because you have to go into the game files and modify things. I'm talking about a proper release.
You think about it, a lot of those games, they cover, say, a 200-odd year period. So you could easily have your start point as just after the Black Death has hit Europe and then run it through to sort of the 1500s into the early 1600s, sort of like there, started to get into the proper age of expansion is where you'd stop it.
Right.
It's that block that's not really focused on so much.
Yeah, I think
200 years worth of stuff you can easily.
I think it goes back to a discussion we had a couple of videos ago. I think now sometimes it's just not sexy enough. You know what I mean? For historians, it's just not a sexy part of history. You know, it's not like the ancient Rome. That's the sexy part of history. Ancient Rome, Carthaginians, you know, the English, the 100 Years' War. It's not considered sexy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's that weird bit because Europe's just come out the Black Death, so it's just trying to reform. So even the Crusades are a bit lackluster because there's not many people around. So Europe's in a bit of a dull point. And actually, if you look into European history, especially English history in the 1400s, it's mainly just sheep and wheat and trading with the Dutch. That's basically all we're doing. It's a super interesting period because this is where you start into Landsknechts.
It goes back to the bias. It goes back to the Western world bias that we've been talking about for so long. We have a Western world bias. You know, we're so biased to the Western world.
Yeah, it's got boring in Europe, so we're just going to skip ahead. Or perhaps we could look at the less boring bit of literally, this is the start of the Mughal Empire, which is one of the most important things that happens to the Indian subcontinent and was actually impactful in that later history as well, because that explains certain things that happened with the East India Company and how India came under British rule, which is a massive, massive part of British history, which is part of Western history and actually a focal point of a lot of Western history as well. So I find it weird that we don't focus on this. Well, why did this happen? We'll have a look at this. Look, people know who the Mongols are. These are like Mongols, and you know who the Indians are. These are the people that were in charge of them for a while. Like you've got some easy connections in there as well. Right. As I said, you've got to cut something from the curriculum if you want to teach it in the available time. And I think this is just, as you say, it's the Western bias. And it's as any country will do, you are just going to be biased to the history of your country. To a certain extent, that's the correct way of doing it. But I don't think history is
in the case of the bias, with the bias of the winning team, the team we always recognize the winners.
Yeah,
the same thing in sports. Same thing in sports, by the way. We always talk about the winners. We never really talk like whoever wins the Super Bowl. That's the team we talk about. We don't really talk too much about the team that loses the Super Bowl. It's like, you came in second. Tough shit. You weren't good enough. Forget about you. Yeah, you put you to the side.
It's just like the Panthers only comes up every so often. It's like when I look at American sport, I'm like, oh, I know them. They've become crap again. So no one's talking about them. All right, cool. Because obviously being outside the US, I don't really get to follow a lot of that thing. So I get to see it from that perspective, quite interestingly, from you saying that I only see these teams that are the winning teams from the outside.
Exactly, winning bias.
It's the same thing. Yeah.
But anyway, guys, we are well past the hour. We really tackled a tough subject in more than an hour. So good on us. I know it was a Sunday afternoon, so I know many people didn't come on because it's Sunday afternoon. You're probably going out, doing your things, watching whatever. But for the Edwards and anybody who might have been watching, thank you for watching. And this will be going up on YouTube sometime today or during the week. So we're going to have our Dungeon Dan take care of that for us. Thank you, Dungeon Dan, in advance.
And he'll probably put another amazing picture on for the cover as well. So look out for the pictures. Yeah, always look out for Dungeon Dan's artwork. Yeah,
so thank you. So, guys, thank you for joining us. And if you didn't get to see us today, you'll be able to watch the replay on the Book Asylum Facebook group. You'll be able to watch the replay later on, and you'll be able to watch it on YouTube when it goes up. So, guys, thank you for joining us. I have been Centurion Axius Maximus. That's been the Gate. We've been Cordier. And thank you for joining us on a special Sunday episode of The Age of Warfare. We'll be back in a couple of weeks with a different subject. which will be coming up during the week. All right.
At some point.
So thank you for coming on by. I hope you enjoyed the episode. We'll see you guys later. Take it easy.
Take care, guys.